TIFU kicking a chestnut, causing traffic chaos and a lynch mob. So obligatory this happened yesterday, but I'm still traumatized as I've never really encountered confrontation on such a big scale. So let me set the scene first. I live and grew up in a fairly densely populated city in Europe that has a good amount of nature patches. The people are genuinely quite friendly and usually not too short-tempered unless strangers, aka non-locals, are involved. The location of this FU was a pretty busy junction just down the road of my flat. Think 2 car lanes, cycling lanes, and pedestrian crossing. Anyway, it was just before rush hour, around 4 p.m, and the sun was grilling everyone in Europe. Climate change, yay, for the past 3 weeks. I was strolling down the road towards the junction, completely blanking my surrounding, as I was trying to come up with the perfect dish to surprise my GF in the evening. Picture that quiet guy just minding his own business, head down, focusing on every single step. Yep, that's me. Suddenly, I bumped my head into a rock, or so I initially thought. I look up. It was the largest man I've ever seen, about the size of the mountain from Got. He looked like a bodybuilder on steroids with a side of extra muscle. Let's call him Arnie. I was startled for a second before I see his buddy, let's call him SLY, who was quite a bit shorter but just as wide as he was tall, so still quite intimidating for an under-the-radar guy like me. Oi, watch where you are going, I bellow. JK, obviously Arnie did. So being super alpha and dominant, I mumble, sorry, and move around them to continue my walk to the supermarket. I mean, how the F was I meant to walk past them when they literally blocked the whole pavement standing next to each other? I think and kick a chestnut out of frustration, metaphorically releasing and passing on all my problems. And oh boy, that worked. Somewhat. What happened next, I could not have imagined in 1,000 lifetimes. Hey, I mean, even with the current AI technology, I doubt they would have been able to predict that outcome. I see the chestnut flying Roberto Carlos style towards the junction. Hell, I heard the crowd roaring. And IMO, it probably even broke the sound barrier. While the chestnut was still in flight, I raised my hand in pride, having reclaimed my manliness with this superb treasure of a shot. And I'm talking the eager please pick me keen bean Susan from middle school hand raise. No, Susan Mayonnaise is not an instrument. Suddenly, everything kept coming down. The chestnut flew past a motorcyclist, around 3 feet high, who must have registered some kind of movement in front of him, and he immediately hit the brake. Remember how I said they had nature patches in the city? Well, the city installed sprinklers to keep the grass hydrated and green, but they somehow have their own spirit and love, releasing water into the most inconvenient directions. You guessed it. Despite almost 40 degrees Celsius, there was a puddle the size of a small American town right there in front of the braking motorcyclist. His braking turns into sliding, into rotating, into falling, and finally into that metal-to-asphalt screeching halting. Behind him, a red car doesn't manage to brake in time, but does a Fast and the Furious, drift and slides past the motorcycle, also coming to a halt in the middle of the crossing, around 5 meters away from the motorcyclist. Then my attention is caught by the opposing lane, as the red car just cut off a blue car's path, who does the same drift, thanks to the puddle, and ends up head-on with the bumper wrapped around the traffic light post. By a miracle of God, or chance for the atheists, the post was harder than a dick after a 2-week dry period, and withstood the incident without giving in. Yet the 10 or so pedestrians waiting behind it scattered away with 2 stumbling over each other and falling flat-faced. What followed after this was the loudest concert of honking cars and screaming, followed by screeching brakes from all directions. And then a split second of silence, until I hear a majestic roaring that Simba would be proud of. Dude, what the fuck? Yup, Arnie and Sly walk up behind me, and instantly get the attention of about another 10 surrounding pedestrians that just at that moment exited the supermarket next to me. They start to explain what they saw to the others, me causing this accident on purpose and celebrating, and suddenly an elderly man, let's call him Miyagi, grabbed my wrist with the iron grip of a Cyberman. At that moment, my life flashed in front of my eyes. My future, my spotless criminal record, my clumsy soap-handling skills, and my virgin butthole. I was not going to make it a single night in prison. Suddenly the commotion starts. Picture a Real Madrid versus Barcelona team versus team fight. All traffic stops. Everyone gets out of their cars and comes towards our little ensemble, shouting. I've never seen a crowd agree that fast on anything, but within 30 seconds, everyone was pointing at me with red faces, anger in their eyes, and most of them looked like they were going to release their Super Saiyan form on me while I was still trying to flee Miyagi's claws. I know, statistically, not all of them could have been Super Saiyans, but still. What I haven't mentioned yet is that I actually look fairly mixed race and live in a very white neighborhood. So within another 30 seconds, many of the screams were more racist than incident-related, immigration, and progressive Europe, yay. Throughout, I just kept silent and head down, as about 30 people by now were surrounding me, still triangled by Arnie, Sly, and Miyagi, so that my voice would have drowned anyway. After about another 5 minutes, which felt like an eternity, the golden opportunity arrived. I think Sly took some pity with me and signaled a countdown with his left hand, so only I could see and pointed into his direction. I am no fighter, but I took one class of Wing Chun back in high school, and in a spark of genius, it all came back to me that moment. Trap the dragon's head, the tail bites. Trap the tail, the head bites. As Sly got down to his last finger, I do the kung fu twist with my arm, break Miyagi's iron grip around my wrist, and start dashing towards Sly. For a split second, I thought I'd run into a muscle wall for the second time this day, but in the last moment, he moved his 300 pounds out of a way with the swiftness of a ballerina. Damn, I was impressed. And then the sprint of a lifetime started. I was Powell, Bolt, and Blake at the same time. I ran like my butthole depended on it. Well, it kinda did. Luckily, the mob never bothered to stand behind Arnie and Sly cause they figured I'd never get past them. So I didn't actually have to tackle anyone on my escape, no potential assault charges, yay, and continued down the road. I see some people follow me, pretty sure they had no clue about the Chestnut, but they just thought I was somehow involved. So I kept running, and I had a good 100m head start. I was just in front of my apartment block when I had the second spark of genius of the day. There was no way I would show them where I lived, so I ran for another 10 minutes further than any man has run ever before. About 2 kilometers, until I reached a park to lie down. I was pretty sure that I lost most people when I passed my flat, thank God for the heat. But I had to be sure. I cool down and call my neighbor whose flat looks down on the junction. I told her the whole story. She's a super old family friend, and she couldn't believe I was the guy sprinting away. She was sunning on her terrace. Turns out the motorcyclist got up without injury, and the blue and red car drivers weren't harmed either. According to my neighbor, the cops and ambulance were called, and they took down the details of all drivers, moved the blue car, and treated the 2 pedestrians for about an hour, while all traffic was stopped. Something I didn't realize from my POV was that a second mob formed simultaneously around the motorcyclist after the crash who blamed him for everything, cause it looked like he just couldn't drive. And guess what? He was a foreigner, so that box was checked. His insurance will probably cover everything. At least that's what my conscience tells me. I haven't left my flat of fear being recognized at the supermarket. My GF was a bit pissed that I made frozen pizza, and I promised myself to never kick a Chestnut again.